Everyone has that one duo that they've played hundreds of games with, and in the world of professional Valorant, those iconic duos are teammates, playing together against the best teams in the world to try and compete for international trophies. Some of the most iconic duos in pro Valorant history are Boaster and Durka, Jing and Forsaken, and Victor and Crashies, but the two players that have been teammates for longer than anyone else in Valorant are Korean pros Stax and Buzz. But unlike the other duos I mentioned, Stax and Buzz had never lifted a major trophy together. They'd been so close so many times, consistently fighting at the top level of pro Valorant, but they always tragically lost in the matches that mattered the most. Well, until now.
The lockdown in play! No!
This is the story of Valorant's longest duo, how they overcame their own history, everyone else's expectations, and the greatest match in Valorant history to finally become world champions. At the start of 2020, MVP PK were the best CSGO team in Korea. But if you know anything about CSGO, you'll know that Asia's prime era of Counter-Strike was long gone. The team was good for their region, but with almost no support, a bad practice environment, and teams dropping out of the game left and right, it was practically impossible for MVP PK to compete with top CS teams from Europe. Stax and his teammates were understandably frustrated with the state of the scene, and so when an opportunity came along for a fresh start in a brand new esport, they took it. Valorant's beta released to a huge amount of hype in early 2020, with people assuming that Riot would quickly turn it into the next big esport. Team MVP's CEO, Kanyang, thought this at the time too, and so encouraged his team to switch games and compete in Valorant instead, rebranding the team as Vision Strikers, with the roster of Stax, Zest, RB, King, Glow, and Termi as the coach. Termi speculated that the team could do very well in Valorant, but I don't think he expected quite how good that would be. Win after win after win just kept rolling in without a single loss, and eventually they made it to 103 games won in a row, securing Valorant's longest unbeaten streak to this day and winning Korea's first Strike tournament in the process. And they did it using an iconic playstyle. While other regions were just competing for who could shoot their gun the best, Vision Strikers were known for their hyper-disciplined set plays and huge 5-person executes. Their utility usage was levels above other top teams in the world, and Stax's plays on Breach in particular made him stand out as arguably Asia's best player at the time. All of that meant Korean teams stood basically no chance. But all good things come to an end, and unfortunately for Vision Strikers, that came at a really bad time. Riot had just announced Valorant's very first international tournament, Masters Reykjavik, and only one Korean team would be able to go. It seemed like Vision Strikers had the spot locked up, but losses to F4Q and U-Turn left them out of Valorant's first ever international LAN. It was a sad moment for the team who had dominated Korea for so long, but they knew if they wanted to make the next one, they had to make some changes. And Glow soon retired from Valorant, so Vision Strikers searched for young Korean prospects to replace him, and eventually they narrowed down the search to two duelist prodigies rising through the Korean scene, Mako and Buzz. They signed both of them to the roster and quickly got to work integrating them into the team, with Stax moving over to the IGL role, and the team also signed Korean superstar Lakia as a 6th player. Those changes worked extremely well and ignited a new win streak for Vision Strikers in Korea. This time though, they managed to perform when it mattered, winning the grand final to qualify for Masters Berlin. The hype for Vision Strikers coming into the event was high, with other teams consistently saying how good they were in scrims.
In Asia, it's really hard to find a team that's on their level, and I think honestly I feel like the rest of the teams here at this tournament should be scared of them because they're crazy sharp, like really crazy sharp.
And they mostly delivered on that hype. They beat PaperX and Ascend in their group to qualify to the playoffs, with their only loss coming to eventual winners Gambit. That performance qualified them to champions later in the year. Unfortunately, they actually did worse at that tournament, losing to Fnatic and Cloud9 in the group stages, but it was clear that with some more time together, this team really did have the potential to bring Korean FPS back to the top of international competition. But before I talk about Stax and Buzz's time on DRX, I do want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, ExitLag. I've struggled with bad internet connection in the past, and I've tried everything to solve it, and nothing really seemed to help. But maybe if I'd have known about ExitLag sooner, I could have enjoyed my games without the lag I was so used to. ExitLag is a software you can simply sign up for and download that can stabilize your connection and reduce latency in games straight away. The reason it works is because most ISPs have subpar routing that limits your internet connection, but by taking the data packets you send out from your PC, for example completely whiffing every single shot in your ranked games like I do, and configuring the optimal routing for that data to the game server, ExitLag can reduce ping and stop stuttering and lag spikes. I have a pretty good internet connection anyway, sitting at around 30 to 35 ping on Valorant, but you can see that once once I turn ExitLag on, that goes down and I'm at around 20 to 25. And plus, it works all over the world, with ExitLag having more than 1,000 servers across 5 continents. It will depend on where you live and your internet provider, but it's worth trying out and seeing whether you could be getting a smoother gaming experience. And now's the perfect time to try it, because with ExitLag's B-Day sale, they're giving you 50% off an entire year. Just sign up and download it at the link below, or use coupon code COMMEND on their website. Thanks to ExitLag for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to it. The new year brought some new changes. Vision Strikers were acquired by DRX, so the team would be playing under some new branding, and the team dropped Luckier to focus on the core 5 members. This squad had already shown they could dominate in Korea, but the question in 2022 was whether they could finally realise their potential on the international stage. Qualifying to the tournaments was still a breeze, as they dominated VCT Korea to qualify to the second iteration of Masters Reykjavik. And once they'd made it there, they continued that momentum to sweep the group stage, absolutely destroying Zeta Division in the opening game of the tournament. In the playoffs, they beat Paper X once again, and that guaranteed them a 5th-6th place finish. But their next opponents wouldn't go down so easily. Optic were establishing themselves as a North American powerhouse, and despite DRX's best efforts, they lost an incredibly close Map 3 overtime to get sent down to the lower bracket. But it was fine, because somehow Zeta Division had scraped through to this point. Remember the team that DRX had literally stomped in the opening match? There was no way DRX could lose.
The pendulum swings, and what can he do with it? He's got everything he can. He's got the operator, and all he's got is death! It's Laz on the other side as Buzz is all that remains. And it's over! It's done! It's all tears in the rain for DRX! But what will last is Zeta chasing the dream!
Zeta continued their miracle run, but it was without a doubt a choke from DRX, and they got eliminated in 5th-6th place from Masters Reykjavik. But back in Korea, they were still untouchable, as they didn't drop a single map to qualify to Masters Copenhagen. And they were still group stage demons, beating Northeption with their duelist player Meteor, and FPX who were playing with a sub to qualify to the playoffs. They won their first playoff game again, but just like in Reykjavik, another super close loss against Optic denied DRX a podium finish, at least for the time being. But just like Reykjavik again, the team against them in the lower bracket was a team they'd already beaten. FPX were looking revitalized after Sugetsu's return to the team, and that was not good for a DRX squad who were already worried about choking another tournament.
The 1v2 for all the marbles, 20 seconds to do it, and Angel denies, the crowd calls, and FPX answer.
아쉽냐?
존나 아쉽지.
너의 그 눈물이 이제 챔스 때 빛을 발하게 되어보자.
Masters Copenhagen was the second tournament in a row that DRX had finished in 5th-6th place. They weren't bad results by any means, but for a team that was consistently touted to be a contender for trophies, it wasn't what they wanted. The team was stagnating at a level where they were better than the worst teams at tournaments, but just not as good as the best teams in the world. Champions Istanbul felt like the team's final chance to break the curse before that dream of winning a major championship was over. But the script seemed all too familiar. They swept through their group once again and won their first match of the playoffs, which included probably the best Valorant map of all time and Stax' iconic mouse kiss.
Stax and Zest this time, surely you can't clutch it out again. I have no idea he's here this early. He's got one scot-free.
Oh my god!
No!
What?
Not again! Not again! How has Stax done it one more time? No. What is going on?
He's made it look like an Ascendant rank game! What?
Look at this man! Look at him!
But after losing to Loud in their next game, they were faced with the same situation they'd seen so many times. An elimination match against a team from their group where the loser would be out in 5th-6th place. DRX versus Fnatic, the final chance to break the curse.
Did Mystic do it? 87 HP, the flash is up top, and no! The Red Bull clutch for DRX! In the face of history, they write a new future! They advance!
They had finally done it. They'd broken through the barrier of 5th-6th place, moving forward in the tournament and proving that Korean Valorant really could produce a top team. And they weren't done there. They destroyed FPX in their next game to make it to the top 3, with a chance to make it to the grand final. And who else to be their opponent but Optic? It was always going to be a close game, and DRX actually almost closed out the first reverse sweep in Valorant history, but Optic managed to win out on Haven to eliminate DRX from Champions. But even though they lost, this wasn't a sad moment for DRX. They had reached 3rd at an international tournament, and not just any tournament, but Champions. It was an incredible moment for the team and for Korean Valorant as a whole. After years of falling just short of their potential, they had broken the 5th-6th place curse. The question now was whether or not they could continue this momentum into the following year and finally win a trophy for Asia. DRX were coming off an incredible international performance at Champions 2022, so when they announced that a new young prospect was joining the roster later that year, a lot of people were justifiably confused. But Foxy9 was apparently not just any player. He was mechanically one of the strongest players Korea had seen in a long while, and DRX felt that was enough to add him to the team. He replaced Zest in all of their off-season tournaments, and while it was clear he was quite good, his performance didn't exactly justify taking Buzz off of his favoured duelist role. That was an odd decision, but what was even more odd was how they kept on subbing him out right before important matches, and how it kind of ruined their whole year. Take Lock-In for example, the first tournament of the Valorant Partnerships era, a 32-team single-elim bracket, lose once and you were sent home. Every game was crucial, and so they just didn't play Foxy9 at all. Even though they'd been practicing with him for months, they decided he just wasn't ready for lock-in, so Zest came back in on short notice, and the team played really well. They beat BBL, Cloud9 and Talon before losing to Loud, finishing the tournament in 3rd to 4th place. It seemed obvious that the team who had just reached top 3 at Champions would continue their high-level performance, but for some reason, DRX's management still weren't happy enough with that, so after lock-in, they kept on practicing with Foxy9. And once the Pacific League began, Foxy9 was back playing and in the team full-time, and it seemed to be working, with DRX winning all but one of their regular season games. They even won a match in the playoffs that qualified them to Masters Tokyo, but as soon as they lost to PaperX and were sent down to the lower bracket, Foxy was subbed out and Zest was subbed back in. It really did feel like they were just taking him out whenever a game had a lot of pressure on the line because he wasn't ready. But that meant he never got the experience playing under pressure, and so he never became ready to handle it. Either way, once Zest was back in, they played really well, because of course they did, beating T1 in the lower final and coming incredibly close to winning the trophy, getting reverse swept by PaperX in the grand final. Buzz and Stax were only one map away from clinching their first ever trophy, but without solid practice among the 5 core players, they just couldn't pull through. But still, they'd qualified to Tokyo, so they had another shot at a trophy in Japan. Unless, of course, DRX were going to pull some more roster shenanigans. Foxy9 played their first 2 matches in Tokyo, where they beat ASE and lost to EG. Their next game was an elimination match against Foot to see who went through to the playoffs. Yep, that's right, an elimination match, and so, of course, out came Foxy and in went Zest. DRX eventually won that series and qualified to the playoffs, but it was just ridiculous to see them change up their roster mid-tournament again. Just imagine what that did to the confidence of Foxy9. And to make things worse, because the Core 5 hadn't had enough practice together, they instantly bombed out of the playoffs to PaperX with a content creator sub and NRG. They fell short of even the 5th, 6th places of 2022, getting eliminated in 7th to 8th.
Watching them in the lead-up, I was extremely nervous heading into this. I didn't like the roster decisions they were making. I didn't think Foxy9 was ready for this level of play. I don't like that they're switching him and Zest out on a whim. I don't like the weird, we're not going to help Stacks in the game shit. I don't like how they're playing the maps. Nothing was great. I was not happy about the lead up into this.
To your point about losing confidence, I think the players already lost confidence ahead of this event. When we did one of those like sit down interviews, me and GB with Stacks from this team, I don't know if they ever aired the interview, but I just like asked him like, what's up with all these changes? Like, why are you guys doing this? How does this make you feel? And he was just like, I don't really know. It's all Termi's decision making, and I don't love it, but I follow it. And it just like the way in which he said it just like sounded kind of like defeated.
So it was clear DRX were in a rough spot. Trying to implement Foxy9 clearly hadn't worked, not even considering the awful timing with which they'd taken him in and out of the team. The only thing that remotely made sense for them at this point was to return to old ways, back to the 5 players who had actually shown a great performance at last year's Champions, the team that had been together since 2021, Stax, Buzz, Mako, RB and Zest. One final chance for the year to see what the team could actually do. They were drawn into a really tough group with Loud, Liquid and Na'Vi, but just like in 2022, they breezed through to qualify to the playoffs in just 2 matches. Then they won their first game against Billy, but then lost the next one to EG to go down to the lower bracket. There, they lost a close match to Fnatic, not able to overcome them this time, to be eliminated in, you guessed it, 5th, 6th place. We'd seen it all before. It was a solid performance considering their tumultuous year, and it seemed like they could build on this performance in the following season, especially if they didn't have to go through any more roster changes. Well, that didn't exactly go to plan. RB and Zest were benched after the 2023 season, making this the first time the core 5 players of Vision Strikers would not be on the same roster since May of 2021. Only Stax, Buzz and Mako were left from the original team, and with Foxy9 returning to the roster, they needed one more player for the upcoming season, and so they promoted Academy talent Flashback to the main team. Although it was sad to see the end of such a long-standing team, the new squad was a good mix of experienced veterans and high firepower rookies. If they could get the synergy right, the dream of a trophy under the DRX banner wasn't quite over for Stax and Buzz. But the dream of being the first Korean team to win a trophy was rapidly fading away, because Gen.G had formed a team of Korean misfits, even featuring Vision Strikers' old 6th man Lakia, and to the surprise of the entire community, were quickly surpassing DRX as the best Korean team. They beat them in Pacific's kickoff tournament to qualify for Masters Madrid, leaving DRX out of an international event for the first time since Masters Reykjavik 2021. DRX watched from home as Gen.G narrowly lost to Sentinels in the grand finals to place second, breezing past DRX's old peak of 3rd place. If DRX were going to take back the crown of Korean Valorant, they needed to do it before Gen.G had another shot at a trophy. And they really tried. Even after more roster shuffling, they went flawless in Pacific Stage 1's regular season, but once they reached the playoffs, they just couldn't find the wins they needed to. Losses to PaperX and Gen.G meant they missed out on Masters Shanghai, the tournament where Gen.G went on to win Korea and Asia's first ever international trophy. Something that DRX had been trying to do for over 3 years, Gen.G's new roster had simply swooped in and done it in 6 months. The title of Korea's best team was well and truly out of DRX's hands at this point. With 2 international events missed in a row, DRX felt they had to change something, and that something was Stax. The only original member of Vision Strikers left on the team was dropped, and Stax and Buzz were no longer teammates. Exactly 3 years after they had first met, their shared dream of lifting a Valorant trophy together was seemingly over.
사실 아직까지 잘 실감이 나지 않는 것 같고, 일단 처음 여기 들어왔을 때부터 지금까지도 구태기 형한테서 이제 게임 안과 밖으로 여러 가지 좀 많이 배웠었던 것 같고, 많은 감정을 나눴기에 조금 팀원 그 이상이라는 생각도 들고, 게임 안에서도 훌륭한 리더였고 밖에서도 훌륭한 리더였다고 생각해요.
And so they went their separate ways. Buzz stayed on DRX, who still looked great in Pacific, qualifying to champions behind Gen.G, and on the other side, T1 was already crumbling, and despite Stax's best efforts, he couldn't bring the team to the regional playoffs. DRX somehow continued the 5th-6th place curse at Champs 2024, but for Buzz, that was the sign that he needed a fresh start. He decided to leave DRX at the end of the 2024 season, and luckily, a new Korean super team was hiring. Stax convinced Buzz to join T1 for the 2025 season, as the 2 teammates were reunited under the most storied org in Korean esports history. T1 hadn't really done too much in Valorant thus far, but in 2025 they were determined to change that. So after signing the longtime DRX duo, they added Masters winner Meteor to the team, a super talented Sentinel player that had elevated Gen.G's former squad to a championship winning level. They rounded out the team with Izu and Sylvan, both less experienced than the main 3, but with clear potential to become superstars in their own roles. Many touted this roster as a Korean super team, particularly because of Buzz and Meteor. The only slightly worrying thing was that this was technically a 6-man roster, as Carpe, former Overwatch pro seemingly cursed to only ever place second, was T1's 6th man, and ready to step in case the team needed him. But surely they wouldn't, right? It was up to T1's super team to try and qualify for Masters Bangkok, and they would need to place top 2 in the region's kickoff tournament to make it there. After a slightly shaky start, they pulled through against Boom, PaperX and Talon to come 1 win away from qualification. But for some reason, T1's coach Autumn thought this would be the perfect time to sub out Sylvan and sub in Carpe. The PTSD from DRX's 6-man roster came flooding back. Was Stax and Buzz really going to have another tournament ruined by wild roster moves? And who else was going to stand in their way but their old org, DRX? They were now a powerful squad of rookies led by Mako, and despite T1's best efforts, they barely lost the BO3 to be sent down to the lower bracket, into an elimination game against Meteor's former org, Gen.G, now rebuilt with another former teammate of Stax and Buzz, Foxy9. They had to win this game to qualify to Bangkok, and luckily they did. They prevented the reverse sweep, with Carpe pulling out some insanely clutch moments to bring them over the line. They still couldn't beat DRX in the grand final, which meant Carpe's 2nd place curse continued, but they'd qualified to Masters Bangkok, and that chance at a trophy was all that mattered. Unfortunately though, they probably weren't going to win it. They were the second seeded team from what most people saw as the weakest region coming into the tournament, and they played a really unconventional style with a big focus on double duelist team comps. Most of the other top teams were leaning heavily into the new agent Taeho, who had defined the meta from the moment he had hit the server. It was only natural for everyone to put them at the bottom of the rankings, especially with teams like world champions EDG, a G2 roster that genuinely looked like the perfect Valorant team, and the just unfair Vitality lineup that happened to be T1's first opponents in the Swiss stage. T1 put up a decent performance, but when you're up against superstars like Durka and Les, it's just not that easy. They were instantly on the brink of elimination. But what better time was there to change up the roster again? Sylvan came back into the team for T1's match against Trace, a must-win game to stay in the tournament. Luckily though, he was looking solid and Trace were really not, so T1 swept the Chinese team aside and found themselves with a 1-1 record. One more game in the Swiss stage to decide whether or not they made the playoffs or got eliminated. And who else but DRX? Everyone naturally assumed this game would go down to the wire, considering their history in Pacific this year, but as the game played out, T1 stole DRX's map choice of Fracture, and suddenly their Neon Yoru double duelist comp on Pearl completely took over.
Back at him, take it down, TP's forward! Bane's stunned up! He's knocked out of the park! It's Hyunmin!
What's up, guys? Who's the best team in Korea now? Come on!
Mako needs to go big, or he's gonna go home. 1v2, they're out in front, but he can't find any of them! 13-4, T1 get their first ever victory over DRX!
Despite everyone's expectations, T1 had reached the top 4 of this tournament, but with their only wins coming against Trace and DRX, many still assumed that they didn't have what it took to be a truly top tier team. But with their next match against the world champions, it wouldn't take long to find an answer.
We'll go ahead and cut him down to size 10-0.
It seemed like everyone was right. EDG continued their red-hot form into this match, but T1 started to fight back towards the end of Split.
Not on a buy round that EDG will bring this to a conclusion. They look to do it with one hero Bulldog and some Sheriffs. Sylvan swings the corners, able to find one. Needs 3 more of those. The weapons have been recovered. The firepower in the hands of EDG. Getting stronger and stronger, Sylvan. Just rejoining the squad, needing to ace clutch to keep them in the map. Avoids the fault line, swings back, finds one! Snaps on a Smoggy! And Sylvan will bail them out!
They did end up losing that map, but then won map 2 and pushed EDG all the way on Pearl, but in the end, Chi-Chu was just too good to be beaten. T1 had given them an incredible fight, but it seemed like the community was right. This whole run had been a bit of a fluke, and it was soon to come to an end against Vitality in the lower bracket. Especially after T1 choked a 7-1 lead on map 1, it seemed like it was all over. But T1 still had Haven and Split left to play, 2 of their strong double duelist maps, and they destroyed Vitality on both of them. With this win, they'd reached the top 3, the highest placement Stax and Buzz had ever made at an international event. But this time, they wanted more. A best of 5 rematch against EDG in the lower final stood between them and Grands, but at this point, T1 didn't even care if they were the world champions.
It over, and EDG look like they're going to try and force themselves out. No one's looking at E2, and what? It's an ace to kick off the day!
That pistol round set the tone for the entire game. EDG only managed to steal a single map in the best of 5, as T1 came away with a dominant 3-1 win. Somehow, someway, T1 had made it to the grand final of Masters Bangkok. They had defied all expectations placed upon them, and after 4 years of being denied the chance, Stax and Buzz had qualified to a grand final together. Now, they were only 1 game away from winning an international trophy. And what a game it was. G2 were coming into this tournament looking like the perfect Valorant team, and somehow they only continued to deliver on that hype in Bangkok. They had an extremely disciplined playstyle and were well on top of the meta, playing a lot of Taeho and Breach. It was a completely different style to T1's double duelist comps, and one that most people thought was undeniably the best. G2 beat everyone they faced at the tournament, with their rematch win against EDG coming in the upper finals of the playoffs. And because they came from the upper bracket, they received a double map ban advantage, meaning they could pick all of their own best maps while forcing T1 to play their worst. Despite T1 already making an impossible miracle run, this game would, without a doubt, be T1's hardest match yet. G2's Teo breach Yoru comp proved to be a better game plan on Lotus, as they won dominantly 13-5 to take the advantage in the series. But it wasn't better than Meteor's ISO on Haven, where T1 struck back to even the score.
Does he get the pull? It does! Spike! I believe he might just have it.
One enemy remaining.
He's got the play of a Meteor. Brings it to a 1v1.
Oh my god.
Just the wall. Noise made. Jonah swings with Meteor! What a shot! What a play!
Abyss was T1's permaban. They'd only played it once all year, and so with nothing to lose, they just sent a Reyna comp, hoping to catch G2 off guard. And they did just that, winning 6 rounds in a row on the attacking side. But G2 had chosen Abyss for a reason, gradually coming back into the game, and just when T1 thought they'd stolen the map away from G2, Jorgamo did this.
They're trying to stop Disrupti from coming through! Finds 2, the reload completed. An dimensional drift online. Swings it! And he gets it done! Jorgamo!
A crucial clutch from G2's duelist to drag them to a 13-11 map win. G2 now stood only 1 map away from the trophy, eager to deny the Korean super team a chance at map 5. And after going up 7-2 on split, it would require a true miracle for T1 to bring themselves back from the brink.
Jorgamo push into the back. Some shots flying through the salvos. Meteor able to avoid them. Pushes out, finds the first, would have to be an ace clutch. Taps it again. Finds another. Just continuing to try to beat the forward Balin. Swinging around the flank. And Meteor pulls off the ace clutch. T1's hero has returned.
The 1v3 ace from Meteor inspired an 8-4 comeback from the side of T1 to push map 4 into overtime. G2 picked up the first defense round, but after 3 in a row from T1, it was decided. It was destiny. We were going to map 5. T1 went up early on Pearl with some ridiculous rounds from Sylvan and Buzz.
View's now going to be started. Timing on that flash, damn good. Shot's not quite coming through. Surely not! He's done it! Sylvan! He just sticks to the fuse! He doesn't fake! He gets the Red Bull clutch! Relay bolt, trying to just pinch in. Has the shot, overdone pop Buzz! Is absolutely massacring them! A 3K, the 4th!
But a team like G2 were not going to give up that easily. Their defense side looked immaculate as they brought the score from 4-8 to 11-9. If G2 won this next round, the game would surely be secured. Stax and Buzz would once again be denied, this time closer than they had ever been before.
Buzz trying to push the corner, but leap from above! Finds that kill. Meteor run down, Sylvan in the smoke, finds himself a second, but Trent will flush him out. The swap of the weapons, the defuse being held. Trent, he's out at safety. He's desperately trying to get it done. And he's just managed to do it. The spike goes on. And somehow, it is a Red Bull clutch at the hands of Stax by the narrowest of margins.
You have got to be kidding me. This looked like it had G2 written all over it.
G2 somehow looked unfazed and won the next round to give themselves 2 clear championship points. But T1 just fought back again and again, winning the next 2 consecutively to bring Pearl to overtime. The defense rounds were traded back and forth, neither team able to find a crack in the other's armor. That was until the score reached 15-14 to T1.
That wall's popped. Thorns there as well. Sylvan able to avoid taking some damage. Swing onto the corner. The off shot not going to connect. Leap just a little bit too slow with that one. TP's back in towards Duckout. He's stunned up. He's dead. Step 1 taken. T1 in with the advantage. Buzz in Demon Secret doesn't want to overextend. Opts to pull back. It's Valon on the opposite side. Izu down to 6 HP, but still swinging, still finding value. As Meteor finds Trent. A 4v2, a 4v1. Jorgamo, the one champion on this stage, asked to do it all. The lockdown in play. No hope in hell. 16-14. The uncrowned kings of a forgotten throne are at long last anointed. T1 are your masters, Bangkok. champions!
And with that, I've been Commend, subscribe if you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.